Okay, so we're getting a bit of a feel for what psychosocial hazards are and why they matter and what role people leaders should play in the workplace. Can we talk a little bit now about the impact of getting it wrong, I suppose? So, Steve, if I can start with you, what could the legal implications be for your business for not creating a workplace environment that is safe from a psychosocial hazards perspective?
I think there's sort of a couple of elements to this. The first one is you're going to see more claims. I think it's clear that people have a better appreciation that, look, if my workplace is, if I'm unreasonably stressed at work, I've got a right to make a complaint about that or to make a claim about it. The second one is that I think we're seeing regulators now start to say, look, if we're seeing an abundance of claims from a particular workplace or from a particular industry, we're going to look more closely at that, and we're going to investigate psychosocial issues in the same way that we investigate other workplace safety issues. And the other one that I think is really significant, that I think we're seeing people start to appreciate but maybe not quite appreciate, is I think we're seeing directors really appreciate that, look, it's my responsibility as a director, it's a personal responsibility, put aside the company's position. It's my responsibility as a director to make sure that people are safe in my company. And I need to be satisfying myself that we're doing all we reasonably can to make it safe from a psychosocial perspective. So I think you're seeing, certainly from my discussions with directors, I'm now at an age where I've seen an interesting evolution in what happens in directors' meetings. Certainly when I feel I started out, the directors heard principally from their chief operating officer and their chief financial officer. As time's gone on, people have been worried about different things and they've started to hear from other parts of their business. But I think what we're seeing now is a much more prominent role. Certainly I'm hearing from directors is they're very interested in hearing from their chief people officer about, how do our people feel in the workplace? Do they feel safe and supported and so forth? And I think that's because directors are appreciating that, look, they're responsible for safety. It's ultimately their responsibility, and they will be held to account personally if it doesn't happen. So that's the big shift I think we're seeing at the moment.
Thank you, Steve. And we're seeing quite a lot of high-profile cases coming out. So do you think we're entering a new era of accountability?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I think we've seen that, from the perspective of what's being now discussed as wage theft, whereas I think 5 years ago, people would have said, oh, look, it's an administrative error if you haven't paid people properly. Now people are saying, look, as a director, you've stolen from people if you haven't paid them properly. And similarly, I think with this, people have gone from saying, oh, people are a bit stressed, that's, these things happen at work, to saying, no, wait, that's a really important safety issue. We'd take it very, very seriously if, whenever we see, we've seen it recently internationally, but I think whenever we see, miners, we recognise an incredibly physically dangerous job, and directors of mining companies have been very conscious for a long time of the importance of making sure that the workers that go down the mine come back up at the end of the day and they're okay. And that's been fantastic because it wasn't always the case, obviously. And I think we're seeing more now that people recognise, that people are talking about saying, well, making sure people go home from work physically okay is, psychologically okay is just as important as making sure they go home physically okay. And as a director, you're just as responsible for their psychological safety as you are for their physical safety.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. And Michelle, it's not all bad, right? Because if you get this stuff right, I'm sure you as an ex-CPO can attest that there are some real benefits. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, if the human case isn't compelling enough, the business case for getting this right absolutely is. Burnout and workplace stresses is accounting for, it's one of the biggest impactors impacting turnover today. And when it comes to holding on to talent, we've just come out of war on talent. We know it's so hard to retain your great people. When you aren't getting this right, you've got implications for employee productivity. You've got implications for workplace culture. You've got implications for the overall wellness of your employees. So when you do get this right, you have a workplace where people are humming along. We know that psychologically safe workplaces have a reduced risk of psychosocial hazards. But also psychological safe workplaces are known to have the best outcomes, not just from a working together and productivity perspective, but also from an innovation perspective and an effectiveness perspective. And those things are all great for the bottom line.
Brilliant. Thank you. And then unfortunately, Erika, we do see some organizations who are getting this wrong, and we see that there's an impact on their employees. So aside of the legal and reputational risks, what impacts have we seen on the engagement of employees when we don't get this right?
Well, we are seeing a very, very strong correlation between experiences of negative types of aspects at work, be it, high levels of workload, lack of role clarity, or, workplace work-related behaviours on engagement. So we're seeing if these things are occurring and we are reporting negative behaviours, we are more than likely to be disengaged. And then we also see the opposite. So if we're not experiencing these aspects at work, we are likely to be highly engaged. And when Michelle spoke of earlier around the leadership responsibility, that's absolutely the case. But what we're also seeing is that people leaders are at a real point in time where they are experiencing a whole lot of pressure and responsibility. So we're having to look quite closely at their engagement levels, because it's a little bit about, put the oxygen on yourself before you can help others. And what we are also seeing is that they tend to be more at risk with regards to these psychosocial hazards. So we are looking at both of these elements. And the funny thing about this is that, yes, our leaders have the responsibility to create conditions where we have high engagement and conditions of really positive psychosocial health. But as employees, we also have responsibilities, and it's a two-way street. And that's where I think education needs to occur, because it's not just the leader responsibility. I, as an employee, are equally responsible for this.